Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new series on my channel that I'm calling Music Theory FAQS, okay? And I don't mean facts as in F-A-C-T, I mean facts as in FAQ, standing for Frequently Asked Questions. So this is the place where I'm going to answer all of the questions that come up frequently by people that are studying music and or music theory. So today's question is probably one of the most important questions I've ever heard, and that is, how do you know what key you're in? Whether you're improvising on your own or analyzing a tune of someone else's, how do you know what key you're in? Where do you start? What is the first step? And so on. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of do this in sections. All right, I'm going to go through and give you all the necessary steps for figuring out what key you're in. All right, step number one, you have to know the major scale. All right, now whether you play piano, guitar, or any other instrument, the major scale is relevant to all. All right, the reason the major scale is called the major scale is because it's the primary scale for all of Western music, okay? So if you want to learn anything theoretically or be able to play any song or take apart anything at all, you need at least a rudimentary understanding of what the major scale is, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen multiple major scales. I think we'll do the key of C, all right? And I want you to notice the key of C right away has no sharps or flats. It starts on C, it ends on C. All the notes are natural in between. I'm also going to put up the key of G. All right, I want you to notice the key of G has one sharp. And then I'm going to put up a third and final scale. We're going to call it the F major scale. And I want you to notice that this one has one flat. Okay? These are 3 out of the 12 major scales that exist. Okay, you have one major scale for every single note in music, of which there are 12. And each of those scales presents a different starting note and different spellings of the notes within the scale. The intervallic relationship between those notes is the same formula for all 12 major scales, which is why all the major scales sound like the major scale. But the spellings and the use of sharps and flats will be very different as we go through. So step one is to learn the 12 major scales. All right, now if you don't know them, I suggest you do a Google search and locate all 12 major scales, whether it's for guitar and you're doing a tab, or whether it's for piano and you're playing the actual letters. Learn those major scales inside and out. Preferably memorize them note for note. Okay, if you can do that, you'll be setting yourself up for a world of easy going forward. All right. Step two in our journey to understanding what key you're in, you should have some familiarity with what's called the circle of fifths. Now, if you know your 12 major scales, you may have learned them using the circle of fifths. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up 5 scales on the screen to show you exactly what this is all about. If you're starting with the key of C, which has no sharps or flats, and you go to the 5th note, it's a G. You're going to take that G and use it as the first note of the next scale within the circle of fifths. That becomes the G scale, which now has 1 sharp. So we went from no sharps to 1 sharp. From there we go to the 5th note of G and we get D. D becomes the starting note of the next scale, the D major scale. That has 2 sharps. All right, so you're seeing a pattern here. The circle of fifths is nothing more than you going to the 5th note of the scale that you're in and using that note as the starting point for the next scale, which will be a 5th apart in terms of the interval, but it will also add another sharp to the pile. By the time you reach the key of B, which is 6 scales down, 6 keys down, you now have 5 sharps, okay? At which point, we're going to flip it and resume the circle of fifths using what's called the circle of fourths. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from B to F. Now, B to F is a tritone, right? So we're 6 scales in to the 12, and we are splitting the octave in half with the tritone. And now we're going to resume with the major scales, but starting from F. And from here on out, you're going to notice that the interval between the scales is no longer a fifth. We're going to call it a fourth. So we're going to go from the key of F, which has 1 flat, to the key of B flat, which is a fourth away from F, which now the key of B flat has 2 flats. And then from B flat, we're going to go to E flat. And the key of E flat has 3 flats, and so on. Before you know it, you've done all 12 major scales with the addition of 1 new sharp or 1 new flat, depending on whether you're doing the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths. But it's a really good way of memorizing the scales, because instead of just having it be random, like going from A flat to F to C to A, do it in the circle of fifths / circle of fourths pattern, and it actually becomes easier to memorize what sharps and flats are in what key, and also using the circle of fifths, knowing what comes next, which will also help you remember how many sharps or flats are in the next one. So I feel like the circle of fifths is a great tool for remembering and understanding how the scales are put together. Now, as I said in the beginning, memorization is key. So you don't want to just be aware of these things. You want to implement them, study them, internalize them to the point where you can recall this information on the spot at any moment. And until you do that, you don't truly understand music theory on the most basic level. Like I said, the major scale is the foundation. So you really should know everything about it before you start adding on with the other stuff. In the process of memorizing those major scales, you also want to keep in mind that if you're looking at a piece of sheet music, standard notation sheet music with treble and bass, or any clef at all that's in standard notation, you're going to notice a series of sharps and or flats. And I'll put some examples of this up on the screen. Like in the key of C, your key signature has nothing, right? In the key of G, it has 1 sharp. In the key of D, it has 2 sharps. In the key of F, it has 1 flat. In the key of B flat, it has 2 flats, and so on. So even before you look at the notes of the song, right at the beginning of that piece of music, they tell you what the sharps and flats are. Now, I know that there's ways of deducing what those sharps and flats are in relation to the key, but I feel like the best possible way to internalize all this stuff is just to memorize. Hey, the key of G has 1 sharp and it's F. Hey, the key of A flat has 4 flats and it's A flat, B flat, D flat, and E flat. Just know this stuff and be able to recall it pretty much on command, okay? The key signature is right at the beginning of the piece of music, and it's going to let you know whether you're in the key of C or the key of B, whatever it happens to be. Now, there is a sidebar issue to this, okay? Major scales also lead you to what's called the relative minor scale. And so what this means is every major scale contains within it the notes of a minor scale that happen to use the same notes but start on a different note within that sequence of notes. So for example, the key of C major starts and ends on C, and there's all natural notes in between. The key of A minor, which is the 6th note of that scale, is the starting point for the relative minor A minor, which also has no sharps or flats but starts on A, okay? I'm not going to go too in depth with this. This is more of an offshoot topic, but just know that if it's not in a minor key, it's most likely in the relative, I'm sorry, if it's not in a major key, it's most likely in the relative minor. Okay, so every key signature has two possible options. And I know modes could possibly play into it as well, but we're not going to go down that road. This is all basic stuff. So when you look at a key signature, you want to think major key first. What you're going to do is if the song is telling you it's in C major, the first and last chord of that song will most likely be a C major chord. Now, if it's an A minor chord and it's still telling you that there's no sharps or flats in the key signature, and the first and last chord is A minor, you're most likely in the key of A minor. Now, let's say on the off chance that you have a handful of chords and no key signature and no standard notation and no way of knowing what key you're in. Well, this is where understanding, first of all, the major scale, the minor scale, key signature, circle of fifths, in addition to the harmonized major and minor scales, comes in. All right. This might be better suited for a part 2 because this video could get very long. But the bottom line is, if you're looking at a group of chords, let's just say you're looking at a guitar tab site and it's just got the chords and you're like, well, what key is it in? Unfortunately, with no key signature and no melody notes to give away a specific key, it might be kind of tricky to figure this out because you're going to need to know the harmonized major and minor scale to fully understand where those chords are coming from. Now, typically, the first chord in the song is a dead giveaway that it's probably in that key, because if you're writing a song in C major, you're going to want to start on C. You have to start at the beginning, right? And the beginning happens to be a C chord. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every song will start on the one chord, but typically it will, okay? I think we're going to have to save this for a part 2. But let's recap what we know. Let's assume that you have a piece of sheet music with standard notation and you don't know what key it's in. Again, you have to know the major scales. You have to memorize them. Use the circle of fifths to help you memorize them. Learn the progression of sharps and flats, the difference between a fourth and a fifth, and memorize them to the best of your ability. Visualize the scale in your head. Like when I think of a certain key, I literally see the notes in my head with the proper sharps and flats in the proper places. And I can also pull out the relative minor of that major key as well. And this is truly the foundation of being able to tell what key you're in. And I'm sorry there's no magic pill to make this easier, but that is literally what needs to be done. Now, if anybody out there is still confused and they've watched this video to this point, first of all, thank you. What I'd like you to do is leave some thoughts in the comments below, because I really want to hone in on this issue. And if there's anybody that is still feeling uncertain about this, please leave a comment. Tell me what you're thinking. And if anybody would like more info, more music theory facts going forward on any other topic, please let me know, and I would be glad to put a video together. As always, thank you guys for watching, and have a great day.